the first understanding is that flu season comes every year. And I say, why is it related to the winter time? And it's an important reason to understand that the viruses that cause the flu generally function better at lower than body temperature. So when we start breathing cold air in the winter, the respiratory tract gets cooler because of the cold temperature than the rest of the body. Well, this makes these cells in the respiratory system pretty prime for a viral infection, especially that works at lower temperatures. So flu seasons come when winter shows up, and then when winter goes away, the flu season disappears because that's not the best environment. So we're facing a flu. Now the issue is this: is it a flu? The answer, it is a flu. They want to make it so special, like, oh, it's not a flu. It's more than a flu. It's a flu. Period. That's what it's about, okay? And the relevance about that is every year we have flu season. It's every year. And I go and I say, what about it? And I say every year about 0.1% of the population will die from the annual flu every year. So why is it so different this year than in previous years? And the significance is this: the flus that come every year are really from the same types of viruses, and that a previous year's flu will mutate and then show up in the next year because it's bypassed the immune system. But the point about it is this: there's an immunological memory of parts of all the different flu viruses that we've had for decades. And so when we have a regular flu, the immune system can fight it, and most people end up with coughing, sneezing, a mild fever. That's the standard thing. When the immune system is working, it will easily cover it. I had a cold. That's basically what I'm saying. I say, so what's so different about this year? And I say, the virus hasn't been around for years and years. It's relatively newly introduced into the human population. So most humans do not have an immunological memory to help alleviate the symptoms of the flu. So this year, the flu is a little more aggressive than previous years, only because most of us have not had an experience with this virus in the past. That's the nature of the game. So then I say, well, how dangerous is this flu? Well, this is the part that is really freaky, because the first thing is this: we equate the flu this season, the Corona 2019 virus, we equate it with mortality. It's like, what do you mean? I said, everyone's talking about, oh my God, we can die. And I go, well, you can die every year. That's not any different. I say, so what's different? I said, it's a little more aggressive. I say, so why is it relevant? I said, okay, the symptoms are a little more aggressive. I say, well, you die from the symptoms. I say, if you have standard medical treatment, even the aggressive form that causes respiratory distress is manageable. As long as we have ventilators, as long as we have antivirals, as long as the hospital isn't under a crush, this isn't lethal. I said, yeah, but people are dying. I go, every year, the same cohort or group of people are affected and die from the flu. And I said, what cohort is that? And I said, people who, first of all, are very old, who are in nursing care, whose immune systems are already weakened just because of their age. And secondly, those people who are already compromised. They have a problem already, whether it's a cardiovascular or cancer or diabetes. They already are compromised. These are the people who are the likely ones to succumb from this particular flu. They've always been this way. Every year, 0.1% to about 0.5% is a range. And I say, well, what about this year? And they go, oh my God, 3 to 4%, which is like 30 or 40 times more lethal. I go, wait a minute, where'd you get that statistic? The way you get the statistic is you take the number of people who died and divide it by the number of people who have the virus. I go, okay. So I said, well, what's wrong here? And I'll tell you what's wrong is when they've tested like a whole city, like in Italy, in Italy, for example, they tested the population and they found that more than half of the people that have the so-called COVID-19 virus, more than half of them have no symptoms at all. I say, so why is that relevant? I say, if you take all the people who have the virus, whether they have no symptoms or whether they have symptoms, that's a very large number compared to the number of people who went to the doctor and got reported to have a virus. So I say, why is it relevant? I say, if you take the very large number of people who have been exposed and who have that virus, and then divide that into the number of deaths, guess what? It's not 3 to 4% at all. It's below 1%. I go, well, now you're in the range of a normal flu. And I go, well, yeah, exactly. But the fear that has been generated by this is the biggest problem of all, because people have to understand about the immune system. The immune system is designed for internal protection. Anything that gets in my body, parasites, viruses, bacteria, the immune system's function is to fight that. And I say, does it use energy to have the immune system? I go, of course. If you've ever been really sick, you probably didn't have enough energy to get out of bed sometimes. I say, the immune system uses lots of energy. I go, so what? Well, then here comes the problem. There are two protection systems. The immune system protects me on the inside. The adrenal system, which is called fight or flight, protects me from threats on the outside. I go, so why is it relevant? Well, let's give a scenario here. You have a bacterial infection. You might have a bad case of diarrhea coming, and you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Question, if I had to divide the energy in my body to protect me from the flu or bacteria and from the tiger, how would you split the energy distribution between those two? And Brian, this is really relevant. I mean, ask you, if you're being chased by a tiger, you got a flu, what proportion of the energy of your body do you want to use to run away from the tiger? And what proportion do you want to use to fight the bacteria? It's a pretty clear answer. I hope you see it.
Probably 99 to 1 is probably what I would do.
Exactly. Okay. So right away, that's the fundamental principle. Fundamental principle is this. I distribute energy in the body where I need the energy. And when it comes to threats and survival, if it's a threat from the outside world, I need to put all the energy into that. So I say, fine. I say, how does this work? I say, when we perceive a threat, when we believe and perceive that we're being chased by that saber-toothed tiger, the body releases stress hormones. I go, yeah, so what? That gets me ready. I say, gets you ready for fight or flight. I said, what does it do to get you ready? And this is the crux of the problem. The stress hormones do is take the energy of the body, stop funding with energy those functions that are not necessary to run away from the tiger. Because what you want to do is you want to get all the energy possible into the arms and legs, which is the blood. The blood carries the energy. I want all the blood in my arms and legs. Why? Because I need to run away from that tiger. So I say, so what happens when stress hormones are released in the body? And the first thing is this, all functions not related to running away from that tiger are shut down to conserve the energy. So I say, well, what does that mean? I say, when stress hormones are released into the body, they cause the blood vessels in the gut to squeeze shut. I go, why? And the answer is, if the blood vessels squeeze shut, then the blood is pushed to the periphery, the arms and legs. So the blood is, in scientific terms, preferentially sent to the arms and legs at the expense of what? Shutting the blood vessels in the gut. And that's when people get butterflies in the stomach. When they start to get scared, they can feel a little queasy going on. And I say, what is that? I say, that's the action of stress hormones causing your blood vessels in the gut to squeeze shut, so you push the blood to the arms and legs to deal with fight or flight. Okay, so the first thing is this. When you're in fear, you shut down the growth and maintenance of the body. It's very simple. Why should I fund those things if the tiger's chasing me? If the tiger catches me, then maintenance of the body is not my problem anymore. So the first step in a stress response is stress hormones shut down the visceral functions of maintaining the body, filtering, cleaning, repairing, replacing things. And I go, okay, that shuts down my growth as I get ready for protection. I go, yeah. And here's the other fact, and this is the one that's relevant. The immune system, as I said, uses so much energy that when it's engaged, we may be so depleted of energy, we don't have any energy to get out of bed. I say, well, again, if I'm being chased by the tiger and I have the bacterial infections, the hell with the bacterial infections. It's time to run away from that tiger. Fact of life. This is it. Stress hormones shut down the immune system to conserve energy so I can run away from the threat. And I go, it's so powerful. at shutting down the immune system, that stress hormones are used, listen, therapeutically. I go, what do you mean? If I am going to transplant an organ from one person to another, the recipient of that transplant, their immune system, by definition, is going to try and reject the transplant because it's foreign tissue. I say, so what do doctors do before they transplant an organ? I say, they give the patient stress hormones, because when they get the stress hormones, it inhibits the immune function from rejecting the graft. So what's the point? My God, stress hormones are so effective at shutting down the immune system that they use it therapeutically to stop the function of that immune system. So I go, so why is it relevant? I go, because we're put into fear, and everybody who listens is now afraid. The difference between, let's say, last year's flu season, I'm coming on the news and I go, the flu season's back this year, and as usual, you have to take care of yourself, and about 0.1% of the population will have severe problems with this, but that's annual. That's the way it is. Or I come on this year, and I say, my God, the flu is here. We're all going to die. Millions of people are going to die. And all of a sudden, it's like, that's a different news report than last year. That scares the hell out of me. And now Bruce, I'm afraid.
And why fear in this particular case? Is it the way it emerged? Is this one actually more contagious? Is that what happened? Or is it just an anomaly that fear came with this flu? What made this happen?
You're going to put me on an edge here, because I can talk about the natural reason. If the flu is coming, we want to have people take care of themselves. But with the idea of attaching to that flu a fear of rampant death, that changes me from last year, like, oh, I can get the flu. I get the flu every year. I cough, I sneeze, I'm okay. Everything's great. This year, oh my God, if I get the flu, I'm going to die. Well, all of a sudden I go, that is a profound change on the physiology of any listener who listens to that. So they want to help us, they say, and I go, the way they're helping us is making things worse. They're throwing gasoline onto the fire with the way we're dealing with this.
So that fear response is making it worse. And that's what you see when you look at this thing from all of your years of study and understanding epigenetics and the immune system. You see something that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, a positive feedback loop, as we see in science, where it's just exacerbating the problem and creating the problem. And it started off with a little fear here, and now it's spread. The fear is spread like a virus, and then the virus is spread like a virus.
Absolutely. So the fear feeds the virus. That's what feeds a virus, because let me just, again, the immune system's job is to allocate that energy from running away. So let's look at it historically. You say, wow, that's really detrimental to the system if the stress hormones are going to shut down growth and they're going to shut down the immune system. Well, that's a terrible design. And I go, when the system was designed, the only fears that we had was to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. Once you run away from that tiger, there's no more fear. I go, so fear was only used for a very short interval of escape. And I say, and what about today? I go, today fear is 24/7, 365. The system was never designed for prolonged fear and stress as we are experiencing in today's world. And therefore, we have thrown this thing so out of balance just because the concept of the fear is all it takes to shut down the immune system.
Wow. So this was destined to happen with all of these mobile phones buzzing in our legs that put us in fear of things around the world that we can't control. Was it a matter of time before that exacerbated with the right or wrong flu virus that maybe this was going to happen?
Well, I have a feeling that the fear is much more powerful in influencing us than the things like the cell phones and the energy fields and all that. Let's go back, because a big fear is, electromagnetic fields. That's been a big fear, and there should be a concern, because biological systems employ electromagnetic fields and vibrations and energy in controlling and manipulating the biology. So if the energy fields around us are altered, they surely can have an effect. And I say, well, is everybody affected by this? And I say, look, when we were afraid because high power, high tension lines, the ones that carry the big load of electricity, and people live underneath those lines, they assessed, is there any difference in the health of people who live under the high power tension lines? And they find out, yeah, for sure, people are affected. You got, more health issues of people living there. And then I go, is everybody affected? And this is where it comes down to the important part. No, not everybody was affected. Those that were affected were already under stress. So stress exacerbated the problem. Those people who weren't under stress, living under these lines, have no problem. So stress is opening up our system from attack, from anything from electromagnetic fields to viruses. And we have to understand that stress is the bigger problem in the immune system.
Okay, now, how do we deal with that stress? That's the big question. And I know you've written a book about this, but also now we're in these strange times as well, that our stress has been exacerbated, not just by the news, but the lockdown and even more. So what's your advice to people?
Well, the first straightforward advice is this: we have to maintain our physiology and our health. And so basically I say, well, how do you do that? And I go, it's not that difficult. The number one thing is this: first of all, eat food that is good for you, not industrial farm, but organic, natural, healthy food. Industrial farm food is loaded with chemicals that influence our system in a very negative way. All you have to do is look at a farmer out there in those industrial farms spraying the crops. They're all wearing hazard suits. I go, my God, they're spraying my food and they can't be in the field with the spray because it's toxic and they're putting it on the food. There's something to think about in that picture right there. So taking care of your nutrition, number one, is important because we nourish ourselves. And if you shorten the supply of nourishment, of course, you're going to be open to sickness. Number two is to take advantage of vitamins and supplements and things to support us because our food isn't that great. Anything we can do outside to enhance our immune system, and let me just add, especially vitamin C. When we support ourselves that way, we strengthen the immune system. And then third thing is watch what you're thinking. Because the moment you are thinking of stressful things like, oh my God, I'm not working for weeks and my job, my salary, do I have any money? Fear comes from that. Can I pay the rent? Fear comes from that. Am I going to die? Of course, fear comes from that. And I go, these fears are the primary things that inhibit the function of the immune system. You want to stay well? Norman Cousins, who healed himself from a lethal disease, healed himself by what? He locked himself in a hotel room and got all kinds of comedies, Marx Brothers and things like that. And what did he do? He just sat there and enjoyed life and laughed and did all that. And he overcame an illness that should have killed him. This is an example of what is so important. If we do not focus on the problems that they keep throwing at us, and you start to look at your life and say, am I okay? Yeah, I'm pretty good. How's my family? We're good. We're healthy. Even if there's a flu, as I said, half the people tested with the flu don't even have symptoms. So it's not as lethal as they say. It's the fear of death is the problem that we must deal with today. And the idea is, am I open to die? And I say, everybody's open to die. But will you die from this flu? I go, not necessarily unless you're part of that same group. So let me just emphasize, the group that should be concerned are the aged people, very old, people on support, like nursing support, like especially in nursing homes, people whose immune system is already compromised. If you are in that situation, then by all means, do everything to protect yourself. Isolate from those people that may be carrying it. And remember, a lot of carriers have no symptoms, so you wouldn't even know they were carrying it. And follow the guidelines of eating well, vitamins, supplements, and thinking in a different way, more specifically for that group than for the rest, because that's the group that is primarily affected by this. Then I say, yeah, but there's a lot of respiratory distress. And I go, again, all of that is manageable if you can get hospital care. If you can get a ventilator, if you can get some antiviral drugs and the medical system, people won't die from this if they get care. So basically, it's not, oh my God, I got the flu, I'm going to die. We got to change that visual picture because that is the biggest problem affecting us today is the fear.
Now, you didn't always feel this way when you had your early medical training, I'm guessing, that your mentality and your belief in your consciousness could affect your physiology. And then you had kind of a realization that maybe it could. Am I giving that narrative correctly? And how do the rest of your colleagues in the medicine profession respond to your ideas when it comes to this?
Well, when did I do this research? It was 1967. So that was, 50 some years ago. I was cloning stem cells. So let's just briefly, what the heck is a stem cell? And here's the point. A human body is comprised of 50 trillion cells. When we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, there's a single entity, I go, no, that's an illusion. A human is a community of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. And I say, so what? And I say, every day in a normal body, every day, hundreds of billions of cells die every day. Just in the time we've been talking, 100 million cells probably have died. Hair cells, skin cells, blood cells. I go, yeah, but what does that mean? I say, well, if you don't replace those cells, you're going to die. I say, well, if you're watching this show and you're here, the first thing is this. Obviously, something's replacing your dying cells every day or you wouldn't be here. And I go, well, what is it? I say, in our body, we have embryonic cells. They're the same embryonic cells we had when we were in the womb, and they're still in our body. I say, what's their function? I say, well, we changed the name. That's the scary part, because all of a sudden now I got a new topic. I said, embryonic cells, of course, embryonic cells are going to replace everything, and then I call them stem cells. Oh my God, what the heck is a stem cell? I say, an embryonic cell. It's just that after you're born, I can't call it an embryonic cell because you're not an embryo. So we changed. But a stem cell is an embryonic cell. It replaces the cells that die every day. And if you're alive, don't worry if you have stem cells, because obviously if you're here, you do have stem cells. So I grow stem cells in a tissue culture 50 years ago, embryonic cells. I clone them. What does that mean? I take one cell, put it in a dish all by itself. And every 10 hours it divides. So first there's one cell, then there's two, then there's four, then there's eight, and doubles and doubles and doubles. And after a week, I've got 30,000 cells in the Petri dish from one parent. What's the point? I have 30,000 genetically identical cells. They all came from the same parent. So 30,000 genetically identical cells. I split them into 3 dishes. Each dish they're all the same genetically identical cells. I say, what's different? I changed the culture medium chemistry. Now, all of a sudden, this is where it connects. I go, so what's culture medium? I say, that's the environment in which I grow cells. I say, yeah, but what does it represent? It represents blood. So if I grow human cells, I look at what is in human blood and make culture medium based on that. Or if I grow mouse cells, I say what's in mouse blood and make culture medium on that. But since I'm making the culture medium in the lab, I can change some of the composition. I make 3 different versions of culture medium. I change the chemistry a little tiny bit. And I feed each of the dishes a different version. So I have 3 dishes, genetically identical cells in all of them, but each dish has a different culture medium, environment. That's another word. I go, what's the relevance? In one culture medium, the cells form muscle. In the second culture medium, my stem cells form bone. In the third culture medium, my stem cells form fat cells. I go, wait a minute. This is 50 years ago, and I'm teaching students about genes controlling life. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at this culture study, and there's a very clear understanding. They were all genetically identical, but they had different fates. So I said, well, what controlled the fate? I go, the only thing that was different was the chemistry of the culture medium. I go, yes, the genetics wasn't controlled, the expression of the cell wasn't controlled by the genes in the cell. The cell was responding to the environment. And as I changed the environment, I changed the fate of the cells. And I just go, wow. When I did that, those experiments 50 years ago, my colleagues looked at me and they thought, well, that's an artifact or something. Why? Because we were all teaching, and even I was teaching, genes control life. And my tissue culture studies say, no, the genes didn't control the fate of the cells. It was the culture medium. The environment controlled genes. And they, I got alienated more or less because they kept saying, oh, that's an artifact. I said, this is reproducible every day. I can tell you when I put the cells in the culture today, I can tell you what's going to exactly happen in 3 days. And that's what makes real science is repetition. I could predict the future, meaning I knew something. But it was the big rush on genes, so it was marginalized, and I left that situation, and actually I left the university. I had tenure and walked out because I couldn't in good conscience go into a classroom and teach students that genes control life when it is totally false. So now let's make this into why this is relevant to us as humans instead of cells in a plastic dish. First thing I said was the human body has got 50 trillion cells in it. The cells are the living entity. So what's the point? A human body is a skin-covered petri dish with 50 trillion cells. And I go, yeah. And I say, and there's a culture medium, the original culture medium, blood. And I say, so what's the point? I said, it didn't make a difference if the cell's in a plastic dish or the cell's in the skin-covered dish. I don't care where the cell is. The cell responds to the environment, which is the culture medium in a plastic dish or the blood in the human dish. And I go, why is it relevant? The chemistry of the blood is controlling the fate of your cells. I go, so why is it relevant? And then all of a sudden you start to recognize this, is that if I change the chemistry of the blood, I change the fate of the cells. I go, yeah, that's what the lab experiments showed. Different environments, different fate. Then we're coming to a conclusion on this. Hold on one second. Here it is. The conclusion is this. The cells in my body are in a skin-covered petri dish. They're responding to the chemistry of the blood, which is the culture medium, which determines their fate. And then all of a sudden, the most important question, there's two, who's the chemist? Who's in the lab? I made the culture medium, but in your body, who's the chemist that puts the chemistry into that blood? The answer is the brain is the chemist. And then comes the most important question of all. What chemicals should the brain put into the blood? Because if you change the chemicals, you change the fate of the cells. So here's the answer. Whatever picture you hold in your mind, the brain translates that picture into chemistry that complements that picture and puts that chemistry in the blood, and the body responds to the picture in your mind. And I go, why is that relevant? I said, I could have a picture of health or I could have a picture of fear. I say, well, that's different chemistry. When you're in love, the brain releases love chemistry, which is like dopamine, pleasure. That's why falling in love, oh, it's so great, it's pleasure. It also releases oxytocin, which bonds you to the source of your love. It releases another chemical, vasopressin, that makes you more attractive to your partner so that your biology is now, advertising, I'm a healthy, happy person, vasopressin. But the big one is this. Growth hormone is released into the blood when you're in love. And I go, so why is it relevant? I say, then tell me what is the consequence of a picture of love? I said, the chemistry of the body provides extreme health. That's why people, when they fall in love, they glow, they're so healthy, everything's like, oh my God, I love my life. I go, that's chemistry, okay? Now let's just give today's chemistry in fear. I say, well, what's the chemistry that comes out in fear? I go, oh, none of that love chemistry is coming out here. A picture of fear in my mind causes stress hormones, cortisol, things like that, and factors that shut down the immune system. They're called cytokines. And so the blood of a person in love has a different chemistry than the blood of a person in fear. And the thing that people have to understand is this. This is like, now comes the critical moment of what? And I say, a cell can be in growth or a cell can be in protection, but a cell can't be in both at the same time. I go, what do you mean? I say, growth, I move to a stimulus, like someone I love or something I like, I move to it, and I'm open. I take it in. Love, I want to be open. I want to assimilate it. Joy, I want it open. I want to take it in. And I say, so growth is going to a stimulus, open. I say, what about protection? I go, oh, if there's a stimulus out there that you are fear of, you don't go to the stimulus, you go away from the stimulus. I say, do you stay open? I say, absolutely not. You close yourself down to protect yourself. So I say, what's the point? Growth, you move to the stimulus. Fear, you move away from the stimulus. Growth, you stay open to take it in. Fear, you close yourself down to protect it. And I go, oh my God, you can't do both of those at the same time. And all of a sudden you start to realize our biology is now based on whether we're open to be in love or we're closed because we're in fear. And I say, well, here we are today, ladies and gentlemen. This is the state of fear that is compromising not just your growth and maintenance of your body, but it's shutting off your immune system, opening us to disease. And this is the biggest problem that we have to face is, what is your consciousness? Because your consciousness is going to control the fate of your biology. And then you go, wow, I go, that's the new science of epigenetics, number one. But let me add this, Brian, because this is, I think, the most important fact, and it's really hard for people to take this fact in, but it's a fact of science. And that is this: the most valid science on planet Earth is called quantum physics. There is no science that has been tested more, affirmed more, proven to be more truthful than quantum physics, the most truthful science on the planet. So if you're going to question a science, the last one you would question is quantum physics. I go, so what's relevant? The first principle of quantum physics is consciousness is creating your life experience. The biology we just talked about is the interface of how consciousness controls the chemistry from the brain, which controls your life experiences, your genetics, your behavior, and the character of your life. And I say, why is it relevant? Because the first principle, as a fact, is we are creating our life experiences with our consciousness. And then the question is, where are you getting your consciousness from? What information are you putting in there? Because that information will be translated directly into your biology. And all of a sudden I say, well, we're sure as heck not given, hey, things are okay. We're being told we're all going to die. And I go, whoa, put that picture in your mind and let me know what kind of chemistry is coming out of your brain. Well, I can tell you, stress hormones and cytokines. And this is where the problem is coming from.
And so, Bruce, how come, when I go to my doctor, I go to the hospital, I don't hear this from any of the establishments in medicine. I never hear it's all about chemistry and biology, and no one would ever dare say that my feelings about something, that my visualizations in my life might affect my biology. Why is that?
Well, basically, we're dealing with, listen, I taught in a medical school, so I have an insight a little bit on the nature of medicine. And the nature of medicine is you stick with a theory until it's absolutely dead. And the theory that germs cause this problem and we're going to blame the germs has been there for a couple hundred years now at this point. But the reality is, epigenetics is a new science. It's from 1990. Is it in the medical school curriculum? Only within the last couple of years. So I say any doctor who got trained previous to 2 years ago or so has very little, if any, information about epigenetics. I go, it's a revolution. Genetics means genes control the character of your life. Epigenetics is the environment controls the genes. If the genes control your life, that belief system, then by definition, we become victims of our heredity. Oh my God, there's a cancer gene in my family and I'm going to get the cancer. Or cardiovascular, my father died when he was 49, my grandfather died when he was 51. Oh my God, I have those genes, I'm going to die at 50. And I go, these are belief systems, of course, and we attribute them to genetics. And now the new science, epigenetics, say, no, this is completely false. That the environment and our consciousness is controlling this. And I say, why is it relevant? Well, if you want to change your biology, then change your consciousness. You don't have to change your genes. The genes aren't in control. With every gene you have in your body, a gene is a blueprint to make a protein. The proteins are the building blocks. So the character of your body in a physical sense is controlled by the blueprints, the genes that make the proteins. I go, so this is a number that will blow your mind, and that is this. For every gene blueprint in your body, I can make over 3,000 different versions of the protein from the same blueprint based on the way I respond to life. And all of a sudden I say, then am I a direct readout of my genes? I go, no. You could be born with mutant genes and cover it up, or you can be born with healthy genes and get cancer. The genes are just the blueprints. How you use the blueprints and how they're going to function is not based on the genes. It's based on the consciousness, which is now supported by quantum physics and epigenetics. They both say the same thing. So the new biology is not in the medical arena for most physicians because they are not programmed with that new science. And I really have to acknowledge, listen, having taught medical students for years, they're like snapping turtles that once they grab onto that belief system, that's going to be there the rest of their lives, because that's what we selected. People who could take all that information in medical school and download it and have a compendium of knowledge. It's resistant to change. And so is there a change? I go, absolutely. Does your physician know about it? If you hadn't been in school in the last few years, probably not. I'm going, well, the revolution is, am I controlled by my genes or do I control my genes? The difference is now that we know we control our genes, and all of a sudden, instead of being victims of our heredity, by definition, we are masters of our heredity, because our consciousness can take any gene and make any kind of copy out of it, a copy that gives me health from the gene blueprint, or based on how I perceive the world and I'm not happy or I'm stressed out, I can make a protein that will take away my health. Cancer, everyone says, oh, cancer genes. Let me give you a fact. There's not one gene that causes cancer. There's no such thing as a gene that causes cancer. Genes are correlated with cancer, but they don't cause it. If you're not living in harmony, a so-called oncogene could be engaged, which will make things worse. But if you're living in harmony, there is no gene that is going to take that harmony and make cancer. Cancer has a lot to do with the psychology, the programming, the experiences of an individual. And so just to give an example, they followed the fate of children who are adopted into families where there's cancer. I say, so what? I say, it turns out the adopted child will get the same family cancer as the siblings get with the same probability. I go, yeah, but what's different? I go, the adopted child came from totally different genetics, and the cancer is running in the family. And what's the point? Cancer is not due to genes. Cancer is due to not living in harmony. And all of a sudden it says, well, then how do you fight cancer? And I say, well, we kill all the cancer cells. I go, the cancer cells are a symptom. The problem is not living in harmony. You can kill all the damn cancer cells you want, but if you don't change the problem, the cause, a cancer will come back again. And so there's a misunderstanding about genes and victimization. We're all perceived as victims of our heredity when we are absolute masters. We control our genetics, and that's the most important fact that people have to understand.
Well, I think as kids, we were pounded into our heads this whole concept of genetics or everything. I remember, doing the charts of the blue eyes and the brown eyes. I remember the fruit flies when I was in high school. And even subconsciously, I think, Bruce, you adopt this, my physical fate is determined by these gene pools. And I think we don't even talk about it sometimes, but it's like almost like our society is constructed by this assumption, even though we don't consciously say it out loud. And so we kind of have this mindset. Then you have companies like 23andMe, and I got friends of mine that are looking at their DNA and they're saying, oh, look, I'm more susceptible to this, and this tells me I'm this. And I'm just like, why don't you live your life? This is crazy. Does that boggle your mind too, that people are so fascinated by these?
It bothers the hell out of me, Brian, because I'm disempowering people. I'm saying, here's the story, live with it. I go, but your story is wrong. Yeah, but you want me to live with it, then I'm not living in the harmony of life. And I think it's an important point to bring up here, Brian, is that we talk about the mind controlling biology. And I go, yeah, the mind. But then I have to say, when we say the mind, it sounds like there's this one thing, a thing called the mind, and that controls me. And I go, no, there are two parts to the mind. They're interdependent, meaning each part to the mind has a different function and learns in a different way. I go, well, what are they? And I said, well, we're familiar with the word conscious mind versus subconscious mind. And I say, well, what is subconscious? I say, sub means below. And so I say, there's a mind in our brain that controls functions below our awareness. Your heart rate, your digestion, your breathing, the pH of your blood. I say, yeah, these are not controlled by consciousness. But it also turns out the subconsciousness learns programs. And so therefore, there are programs that are downloaded into the subconscious. This is a very good point to bring up right now. It refers back to the virus, okay? What is a virus? I need to bring this in, and then we'll come back. And I say a virus is a structure that conveys information to a recipient cell. I say, oh, now that's complicated. What am I talking about? So let's simplify it. I have a memory stick for a computer, and that memory stick has programs in it. And if I plug that memory stick into the computer, it will download the programs. And if the programs are virally infected, nice word, the programs will infect your operating system and in the process distort the function of the system. That's why, oh, we're clearing viruses out of the computer. I say, what is a virus? It's information that went into the program. So what is a virus in biology? It's a memory stick that plugs into a cell and deposits a piece of programming that will take over the programming of the cell. I go, is the virus alive? I say, it's no more alive than a memory stick for a computer. It's exactly what it is. There's no life to it. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't have metabolism. It is a capsule with a program inside, and the surface of this capsule binds to specific cells, injects the program just like a memory stick, sticks the program into the computer. Is the virus alive? No. It has no character of life at all. It's just a memory stick.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.